Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're mapping out a seriously fascinating journey, the complete lifespan of English proficiency. We're going to track exactly how the English language is taught, tested, and regulated. We'll start right in the high school classroom, move through the high-stakes gates of university admissions, and finally land smack in the middle of the corporate boardroom. Whether you're a student, an educator, or a working professional, you interact with the rules of the English language every single day. But how often do we actually stop and ask, who makes these rules, and what exactly are they measuring? Well, we're going to unpack all of that today using some incredibly revealing research and data. Let's get into it. Here's our roadmap for today. First up, the high school English journey. Second, measuring IGCSE success. Third, university admission language bias. And finally, English-only workplace policies.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the high school English journey, the academic evolution. Let's explore how the Cambridge system transforms English from a pretty basic communication skill into a rigorous, highly theoretical academic discipline. The shift in expectations as a student ages is massive, and honestly, a lot of times, the students themselves don't even realize how radically the curriculum is changing under their feet.
There is just a stark contrast in expectations as students move from age 14 to their final years of high school. At the IGCSE level, the core question a student really has to answer is simply, can I communicate this message clearly? But fast forward a bit, and by the time that same student reaches A-level, the question completely changes to, how does this text reflect psychology, history, and global societal power? You literally go from learning what an author is saying to analyzing exactly why society allows them to say it that way. It's a totally different ballgame.
So how does this actually build up? It happens gradually from foundational IGCSE pathways. At ages 14 to 16, the Cambridge system splits English into three distinct paths. Step 1 is English as a second language, or ESL. This is all about practical mastery, writing formal emails or skim reading a text for information. Step 2 is first language English. Here, students aren't just learning grammar anymore. They're learning how to actually manipulate language. For instance, they might have to read a complex scientific article and completely rewrite it into a persuasive speech. And finally, step 3 is literature in English, where the focus shifts entirely to literary texts. Think Shakespeare, analyzing plot, characterization, and core themes. But wow, once students hit A-level, everything changes. General English, it completely disappears. It gets replaced by these deeply theoretical linguistics modules that genuinely look like first-year university courses. They study language change, literally tracking syntax from the 1500s all the way to modern internet slang and emojis. They study child language acquisition, diving into psychological theories from Chomsky and Piaget on how infants learn to speak from scratch. They analyze English in the world, looking at linguistic imperialism and localized varieties like Singlish. And they dive into language in the self, unpacking the complex relationship between language, gender, and socioeconomic power. It is a massive, massive academic leap. Moving right along to Section 2, measuring IGCSE success, the performance data. It's time to look at the hard numbers to definitively answer a major educational debate happening in the UK and around the world. Are IGCSEs actually easier than standard GCSEs? There's been a lot of talk suggesting that international qualifications might just be inflating grades. So Cambridge Assessment decided to actually track the data to find out the truth. The crucial data point to remember here is 56%. Researchers track students who took their IGCSEs, and then they monitor their progress to see exactly how they performed 2 years later in their A-levels. What they found was that 56% of Cambridge IGCSE points were above the standard GCSE progression line at A-level. To put that simply, for a given grade in a given subject, students who took the Cambridge IGCA actually outperformed their peers who took the standard GCSE when they both eventually reached A-level. Tom Benton, the principal research officer at Cambridge Assessment, really hit the nail on the head with this quote. It conclusively disproves the whole myth that IGCSE students are somehow awarded grades they didn't really earn. Look, if the foundation was weak, or if the test was somehow just easier, these students would inevitably hit a wall and struggle when facing the intense rigor of reformed UK A-levels. But instead, the data proves the exact opposite. Their future performance is incredibly strong. Now let's shift gears to Section 3, University Admission Language Bias, the gatekeeping. Okay, so you've passed your high school exams, and now you're applying to university. But here, language requirements suddenly become this highly complex, sometimes frustrating gatekeeping mechanism. I really want to ask you this critical question.
Who actually has to prove their English? This question sits right at the heart of some truly fascinating research by applied linguists Ingrid Pillar and Agnes Bodis regarding Australian university admissions. We so often assume language testing is just for quote-unquote language learners. But how does a university actually decide who is a learner and who is already a speaker? Well, the research reveals that universities create this pretty harsh binary. On one side, you have inherent English. This basically gives a free pass to applicants based on a messy, subjective combination of citizenship, heritage, and specific educational backgrounds. Honestly, they might even accept a utility bill or a reference letter from a local sports coach as proof of an English-speaking background. But on the other side, if you don't happen to fit that very specific mold, you're forced into tested English. You are instantly placed in a deficit perspective, and your lifelong language proficiency is reduced down to a pseudo-objective numerical score from a commercial test. And bizarrely, that score comes with an expiration date.
This real-world example they found is absolutely wild and brilliantly illustrates the bias of the system. Pillar and Bodis highlight two specific applicants. First, there's Mohammed. He's literally a university lecturer in an English department in Bangladesh. All of his prior education was in English, and he has actually published academic writing in English. Yet, the university forced him to take an expensive commercial language test. Then we have Marlene, an applicant from Germany. She only ever studied English as a foreign language in high school. She'd never been educated in an English medium, had absolutely no experience with academic writing in English. But because of her specific European high school certificate, her language requirement was entirely waived. So a highly fluent published academic was scrutinized, while a candidate with limited experience was handed a free pass.
The core takeaway from this university data is crystal clear. These exemptions often map incredibly closely onto the white native speaker citizen construct. Even though universities strive for objectivity, their admission criteria inadvertently bake identity, heritage, and citizenship right into the construct of language proficiency. And that frequently results in excluding highly capable international students who just don't happen to have the right passport. Which brings us to our final stop. Section 4, English-only workplace policies, the legalities. Because what happens when English proficiency follows us out of the university and into the professional realm? It actually becomes a matter of strict employment law. Looking at legal guidance from the employment law solution, we can see exactly how companies have to navigate the incredibly thin ice of corporate language rules. Many employers want to implement English-only policies because they think it creates a safe and effective workplace. But doing so improperly exposes them to massive discrimination claims and severe legal liability. It's a legal minefield. You see, employers can't just ban other languages because they feel like it. Under the law, they have to prove a strict business necessity to mandate an English-only policy. The courts do recognize a few valid justifications. Think things like ensuring workplace safety, especially in emergencies or when employees are operating heavy machinery or handling dangerous substances. It's also valid if it's strictly required for communicating with English-speaking customers or to allow English-speaking supervisors to properly evaluate an employee's performance. The policy has to be incredibly narrowly tailored to minimize any disparate impact on non-English-speaking employees. But employers, watch out, because there is a massive legal danger zone here. An English-only policy implemented to stop employees from speaking foreign languages during their lunch, their breaks, or their personal time is incredibly difficult to legally justify as a business necessity. If an employer tries to enforce an English-only rule during off-duty hours, they are walking right into a discrimination lawsuit. Bottom line, as long as personal conversations aren't disruptive to the work environment, employees have the absolute right to speak in the language they are most comfortable with. Wow, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. From the rigorous linguistic theory taught in Cambridge high school classrooms to the actual performance data of those students, through the somewhat biased gatekeeping of university admissions, and finally landing on the legal landmines of corporate English-only policies. It's a lot to take in. So I want to leave you with this one final provocative thought to reconsider everything we've learned today. Are our strict rules around English actually measuring communication, or are they just gatekeeping? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the systems around you, and I'll catch you next time.